My sister once filmed me crying at her birthday party and posted it online with the hashtag #TeacherTears. It went on trend for 3 days. People laughed, called me dramatic, said I should have smiled and poured another glass of wine. She has never apologized. Not once. That night, I went home to my studio apartment, peeled off my thrift store dress, and opened a blank browser tab. By morning, I had a name, a domain, and a plan to never be humiliated again. At Thanksgiving, when she raised her glass to real careers, I smiled, because by then, I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was her son's future boss, and none of them saw it coming. Cassie always made an entrance, even in her own house. That year, Thanksgiving 2017, she opened the door wearing ivory cashmere and a smile that felt engineered. The air inside smelled like truffle oil and imported eucalyptus. Classical music played in the background, but it shifted into Michael Bublé's holiday album the moment I stepped in. Perfect timing, as always. I arrived carrying a slightly dented aluminum tray of my homemade cornbread stuffing. It was warm in my hands, heavy with sage and butter and effort. Cassie didn't take it from me. She motioned toward the kitchen like I was a staff member returning from break. "Still teaching at that school with the bulletproof doors?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of Pinot without waiting for an answer. That was Cassie's way. Questions weren't meant for conversation, just punctuation on judgment. "Yes," I said, slipping off my coat, which still carried the faint scent of the Bronx subway. "Still surviving," she smirked, raising her glass. "You always did have a flair for drama." The living room gleamed with curated autumnal decor, cinnamon-scented candles, symmetrical pumpkins, and place cards printed in gold cursive. Ethan, her 15-year-old son, was sprawled on the couch, half listening while scrolling on his phone. When he saw me, he grinned. "Hey, Aunt Lauren, how much do you make again? My camp counselor said he cleared more than 60 grand this summer." "Ethan," Cassie said sharply, but with amusement in her eyes. "We don't ask people about money." "Right, sorry," he muttered, going back to his screen. "Just wondering." The dining table had been set by someone paid to care about linen folds. Each fork, knife, and plate was in its rightful place, except for mine. Mine was missing a napkin ring. No one noticed. Or maybe they did. Dinner was plated in the kitchen and served by 2 young catering assistants in black polos and khakis. Cassie didn't even carve her own turkey. "Efficiency," she explained when our mother asked. "It leaves room for conversation." Conversation, in Cassie's world, was a performance review in disguise. "How are your little ones doing?" she asked, smiling at me across the table. She meant my students. I knew she did. "They're learning," I said, passing the sweet potato casserole I hadn't touched. "They're creative, curious. One of them wants to be an engineer." Cassie tilted her head like I'd spoken in birdsong. "Adorable," she said. "Do they know what engineers actually do?" Dad chuckled softly. "Lauren's always had heart. That's something." "Sure," Cassie said, raising her eyebrows at Daniel. "But heart doesn't pay tuition." Daniel, ever the diplomat, nodded with a half smile and returned to slicing his turkey. He didn't speak to me directly all evening. When dessert came, a pumpkin tart from some award-winning bakery, I excused myself to help clear plates. In the kitchen, one of the caterers handed me a dish towel with a smile. I scrubbed gravy off the china like it was part of my job. That's when I heard her. "She means well," Cassie said, voice floating in from the hallway. "But you know Lauren, always saving the world, never interested in joining it." "She's got integrity," Mom offered. Cassie sighed. "Integrity doesn't buy a house in Wellesley." I stood still, holding a gravy-slick plate and blinking into the steam. Something inside me tightened, but not with surprise, with recognition. She hadn't changed. I had only grown tired of hoping she would. We rejoined the table for coffee. Cassie stood to give a toast. "To family," she began, lifting her glass, "and to real careers and real success." Her eyes flicked to mine. Smiling, knowing, triumphant. I smiled back, not out of warmth, but because silence, used right, is sharper than words. I didn't drink. I folded my hands in my lap and let the toast hang in the air like perfume, expensive, heavy, and suffocating. Later that night, as I folded my coat over my arm, she walked me to the door. "You should really think about going back to school," she said, her voice low. "You're so smart, Lauren. It's such a waste." I nodded once. "Happy Thanksgiving, Cassie." She leaned in, brushing her cheek against mine with a kiss that never landed. Her perfume clung to my hair all the way back to the train. I sat alone on the ride home, watching the lights of suburban stations pass by like polite lies. My hands smelled like dish soap and cinnamon. I thought about the toast, about the look in her eyes. I didn't cry. Instead, I replayed her words in my head, like a song I didn't like but couldn't stop humming. She meant them to diminish me, to shrink me. But I collected them, tucked them away in the quiet folds of memory. Words have weight? Yes, but they also burn. And someday, I thought, they'd make excellent kindling. In Wellesley, ambition came in stock options. In my classroom, it came in crayons, busted calculators, and overdue rent notices folded neatly in the corners of backpacks. That winter, 2018, the pipes in the school hissed louder than the intercom. Everything felt held together with duct tape, because it was. Most mornings began with the sound of lockers slamming and someone yelling down the hallway for Luis to stop running. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach, tater tots, and cold air that didn't quite leave your bones. My classroom was room 207, second floor, across from the water fountain that only worked when it didn't matter. The window blinds didn't roll up anymore. Zion tried once and got them tangled like spaghetti. I had 15 students that period, each of them louder than the last, except for Jada. She always sat in the second row, left corner, head slightly tilted down, eyes tracking everything like a chess player. She didn't speak unless called on, and even then, only offered what she was sure about. That week, I was teaching fractions. Not exactly thrilling stuff, but I tried. "All right, think pizza," I said, holding up an empty cardboard box I'd rescued from the teacher's lounge. "If I cut this into 8 slices and Zion eats 3, what fraction of the pizza is left?" "None," Luis shouted. "Zion eats all of it." Laughter bounced around the room. I smiled. "Okay, fine," I said, playing along. "Zion eats 6. Now how much is left?" 2/8, Jada answered quietly. "Exactly," I said. "And what's 2/8 in simplest form?" Jada blinked. 1/4? Boom. I pointed at her with a dry erase marker like it was a magic wand. Lunch was the usual square pizza and chocolate milk. The kids sat in clusters, some joking, some arguing about sneakers, a few staring at their phones they weren't supposed to have. I sat with them sometimes, but that day I stayed behind in the classroom. There were papers to grade, and honestly, I needed a moment where no one asked me anything. After school, Jada stayed behind. She didn't say why. She just lingered. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her at one of the desks. She nodded, tapping her pencil. I don't like reading aloud, but I know the words." I slid the worksheet between us. We took turns. One sentence her, one me. By the 3rd paragraph, she stopped stumbling. "You're doing fine," I said, watching her eyebrows relax. Her voice had weight when she believed it belonged. Later that night, in my studio apartment, the one with the leaky bathroom ceiling and the hot plate that worked when it wanted, I opened my old laptop. It whirred like it was coughing. I sipped gas station tea and stared at a blank screen for a long while. I started sketching. Not art. Ideas. I drew a mock-up for a simple app, one where students could practice math problems and earn points towards silly badges. I had no budget, no plan, no coding background. But I'd borrowed a couple of programming books from Marcus, my neighbor downstairs. He used to work in tech before the company he joined got bought out, and he decided early retirement was the only sane path. "You're wasting your intelligence," Cassie's voice echoed from some corner of memory. Maybe. Or maybe I was redirecting it. A few nights later, during a snow delay, we held vision board day. The kids were suspicious at first. Scissors and glue weren't usually part of math class. But once the magazines came out, so did the enthusiasm. Zion cut out a Lamborghini and glued it over a calculator. "Math plus swag equals me," he declared. Luis made a collage titled "No More Tests" and covered it with images of soccer balls and sleep. Jada worked quietly, flipping pages slowly. When I passed her desk, she quickly tucked something under her elbow. "Want to show me?" She hesitated, then slowly pulled it out. It was a picture of a tablet screen, next to a kid smiling. Above it, she'd written in bubble letters, "Smart isn't just for rich kids." I blinked. "I want to make something that makes kids feel smart," she whispered. I opened my mouth, then closed it. For once, I didn't need to say anything. I just nodded. Later that afternoon, as the snow fell sideways across the schoolyard and kids scrambled for their coats, Jada waited near the door while I packed up. She looked at me seriously. "Miss Kim, how come you don't work at one of those fancy schools? Like where they wear uniforms and go on trips to Paris?" I smiled. "Because this one needs me." She nodded like I'd said something sacred. That night back in my apartment, I reopened the sketch on my laptop. I downloaded some free software Marcus recommended. It was clunky. I didn't know half the words in the instructions, but I kept going. Click, drag, delete, retry. The prototype blinked to life on my screen. Bare bones, but alive. It worked. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the way Cassie said, "Bless your heart," with that sugar-coated blade she kept sharp behind her lip gloss. She said it the way only a big sister could. Soft, practiced, and meant to leave a scar no one else could see. Her 40th birthday gala was held at the Beacon Grand Hotel in Boston. Even the air felt filtered. There were so many mirrors. I saw myself at least 4 different ways before I even reached the check-in table. Everything sparkled, from the chandelier to the trays of oysters to the sequins on Cassie's jumpsuit. The theme was timeless elegance, which in her case meant silver, champagne, and an Instagram filter in every direction. I almost didn't come. I'd had a long week at school. 2 fights in the hallway, 1 shattered Chromebook, and a surprise visit from the district rep. But Dad had called to remind me how proud Cassie would be if you showed up, and Mom asked if I'd be wearing the pearl earrings she bought me 3 Christmases ago. Guilt travels fast in my family. So I showed up, in my navy blue TJ Maxx dress that clung a little too tight at the waist. I curled my hair, dabbed on concealer, and carried a bottle of decent wine in a recycled gift bag. I even practiced smiling in the Uber, thinking if I could just keep it up for 2 hours, I could survive. Cassie met me at the entrance like she was greeting a press photographer. "Lauren," she said, loud enough for nearby heads to turn. "Oh, thank God. We needed some grounded energy around here." She leaned in for an air kiss that landed somewhere between awkward and absent. Her perfume was strong, something expensive that came with a catalog. "I brought wine," I offered. She glanced at the bag and waved it off. "Sweet. The bar's open. We're only pouring French tonight, but I'm sure someone can sneak that into the staff kitchen." She laughed at her own joke. I didn't. Inside, the crowd was polished, well-dressed, and curated. A hedge fund manager, a fertility specialist, a woman Cassie introduced as an advisor to the advisor of a presidential campaign. Everyone had teeth too white and eyes too interested in their reflections. I stood near the shrimp tower, trying not to sweat. Daniel, her husband, was already tipsy, wielding his phone like a camera crew. He stopped in front of me. "Lauren," he said, "give me a look." The underpaid but fulfilled vibe. "We're building a brand here." I blinked. He laughed, clicked a quick video, and moved on. Then came the toast. Cassie tapped her crystal glass, and the room fell into a hush that was practiced, obedient. 40, she began. It's not just a number. It's a statement of success, of resilience, of Botox laughter. She thanked Daniel for editing her moods, and her friends for being beautiful inside, but especially out. She turned toward our parents, seated near the stage. And to Mom and Dad, she said, thank you for raising 2 daughters so differently. One of us took the boardroom, the other, well, she looked straight at me. The other took the blackboard. Some polite chuckles, a few full-on laughs. She's a teacher in the Bronx, Cassie said. Yes, that Bronx. Can you imagine? She gestured like a magician presenting an unexpected trick. My sister, the martyr, teacher. I stood there, my hands clasped together like a student at her own parent-teacher conference. She says she's changing lives, Cassie added, her smile widening, and I say, bless her heart. Daniel filmed it. Of course he did. I left early. No one stopped me. I rode the subway home in silence, the dress wrinkled in my lap, heels dangling from one hand. The train smelled like metal, rubber, and indifference. I stared at my reflection in the window and wondered when I'd stopped pushing back. Back in my apartment, I sat on my futon, peeled off the dress, and opened my phone. There it was, a 30-second clip, my face, my fake smile, Cassie's joke, Daniel's voice cackling in the background, the caption, number teacher tears. It had 57 likes already, a few comments. Lol, this is peak big sis energy. Is this real? She's so stiff. Imagine being poor and sanctimonious. I read each one. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. But I felt something tighten under my ribs, like a knot slowly cinching. Then a message popped up, a direct message from a name I recognized but couldn't place. Miss Kim, you helped me read my first book. Don't forget who you are. I stared at it for a long time. Longer than the comments, longer than the video. I didn't write back, but something in me settled. I opened my laptop, the old one, covered in stickers from student fundraisers and PTA bake sales. It wheezed when it started, like it resented being asked to work late. I went to Gmail and created a new account. novacarter@protonmail.com. No last name. No past. Just forward. Then I opened a tab to register a domain, edunova.io. It cost $12. I used my last available card, the one I usually reserved for emergencies or takeout. This felt like both. I hit confirm. The confirmation page loaded slowly. My apartment was always a few seconds behind the rest of the city. I stared at the blinking cursor. Title: Edunova. Internal Prototype 0.1. I had no investors, no funding, no roadmap, just an idea and a bruised heart. But that night, in that moment, I stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission. $12. That's what it cost me to stop being someone they could mock. The resume had blockchain, Harvard, and buzzwords. The name is Ethan Miller, but the email said, Dear Ms. Carter. I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have, blinking like it might rearrange itself if I just waited. But there it was. Ethan. Cassie's golden boy. Her Harvard-declared, algorithm-building, self-proclaimed future CEO of the world. As I sipped lukewarm coffee in my Bronx studio, surrounded by whiteboards, color-coded stickies, and a pothos plant doing its best to stay alive, I read through Ethan's application for our summer internship at Edunova. GPA 3.9. President of the Blockchain Club. Founder of a decentralized education funding prototype, he proudly labeled his passion project. His LinkedIn had endorsements from 3 professors and a venture capitalist I recognized from Cassie's Instagram. He had no idea who I was. Of course, the resume was addressed to Nova Carter, the pseudonym I had chosen carefully, 3 years earlier, on a night filled with frustration and quiet resolve. Nova for new, Carter for anonymity. Together, a version of me I could build without anyone else's permission. His cover letter was flattering. Edunova is changing the future of education, he wrote. I'm passionate about equitable access to learning, especially in underserved markets. Markets, not people. I could almost hear Cassie in the phrasing. Internships are only useful if they lead to IPOs, she once said, half laughing over a glass of Chardonnay. I hadn't responded then, but tonight, I had the power of silence and a decision to make. I scheduled the interview for Thursday, 4 p.m. Zoom, camera off, voice steady. When the day arrived, I adjusted my sweatshirt collar and cleared my throat. I opened the Zoom link and muted my emotions. He appeared on screen right on time. Sharp suit jacket over a t-shirt, AirPods in, white walls behind him, and a Harvard pennant in the corner of the frame. I didn't think he noticed it was there, but I did. "Hi, Ms. Carter," he began. "Thanks for making time today." His voice was confident, his smile well-rehearsed. He spoke with the ease of someone who'd been told often and loudly that he was exceptional. "No problem," I replied, lowering my voice just enough to avoid recognition. "Let's jump in. Why are you interested in education equity?" He grinned like he'd anticipated the question. "Education is the next frontier for disruption," he said. "There's a huge inefficiency in the way public systems allocate learning outcomes. I believe tech can flatten that curve." Flatten that curve? I scribbled something in the corner of my notepad, though I wasn't sure what. Maybe a word, maybe just a line. "And what," I asked slowly, "does equity mean to you?" He paused. "Well, it's about democratizing access," he said. "You know, leveling the playing field, giving everyone the same tools." I let the silence hang for a beat. "Same tools," I echoed. "Yes," he said, missing the edge in my tone. "I think education is ready to be disrupted in the way fintech was 10 years ago." I glanced down at my desk, where his resume lay next to a coffee ring I'd accidentally left that morning. It blurred the corner of the page slightly, like the universe's way of editing. I asked a few more standard questions, jotting down notes for the record. He answered them all smoothly. No stumbles, no awkwardness. Just polish. Maybe too much. When the call ended, I thanked him for his time. "We'll be in touch," I said. He smiled, looking forward to it. I closed the Zoom window and leaned back in my chair. The silence of my apartment filled the space he left behind. Outside, sirens passed in the distance, constant, familiar. The sun angled through the blinds, casting long stripes across the floor. I picked up his resume again and stared at the header. Ethan Miller, printed in bold. I thought about Jada, about the way she whispered, "I want to make something that makes kids feel smart." I thought about the school cafeteria, the stickers my students used to label the iPads we borrowed from the city grant, the way they lit up when they got something right without being told. I pressed my mug over the corner of Ethan's resume and left a fresh coffee ring. It felt ceremonial. I didn't hate Ethan. He wasn't cruel. He was just Cassie's world, repackaged with less gloss and more tech. But he didn't get it. Not yet. I folded the resume in half. In my mind, I stamped it. Rejected. Not out of spite, but because I wasn't looking for disruptors. I was looking for listeners. Builders. People who understood that equity wasn't a market. It was a mirror. We had another meeting scheduled, this time face-to-face. Cassie handed me a glass of Pinot and said, "Act impressed." I smiled. I was. Not because of the curated orchids or the chilled wine fridge synced to her iPhone, but because I already knew what was coming. And this time, I was ready. Her house hadn't changed much, only grown more pristine. The marble floor in the entryway looked polished to the point of vanity. A new rug stretched across the foyer, probably imported. Each room carried the same deliberate sterility. Nothing out of place, nothing unnecessary. Cassie's world was composed, filtered, and performative. I had walked into it 100 times before. But today was different. Today, I carried a name she didn't know belonged to me. She led me inside with a theatrical sweep of her arm. "We just had the lighting redone. You wouldn't believe the difference it makes for Zoom calls. The designer said it creates a glow-forward atmosphere." Her voice dripped with curated excitement. I nodded, sipping just enough of the wine to keep her from asking questions. The glass felt expensive in my hand, but nothing about it made me feel warm. That was the thing with Cassie. Everything sparkled, but little ever felt sincere. She steered me into the living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled sunlight across glass-topped tables and carefully placed art books. The coffee table centerpiece was a sculpture that looked like a crumpled napkin, but probably cost more than a month's rent in the Bronx. "Daniel's prepping the cheese," she said, as if that were a normal thing husbands did when their wives hosted casual drinks. "Ethan's getting ready. He's meeting someone important today." "I heard," I said. Cassie turned toward me, one brow arched. "You did?" "Small world," I replied. She smirked. "You'd love this. He's got an interview with the CEO of Edunova. You know, that edtech startup that's getting all the press. Ethan's obsessed." I let the silence linger for a beat. Then, "How impressive. He's been prepping for weeks. Had me proofread his resume 4 times. Harvard really molded him well. And modest, too," I said dryly. She didn't catch it, or chose not to. We heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. Ethan appeared, tall and sharp in a tailored navy blazer, his Hermes tie a little too tightly knotted. He looked like the closing slide in a TED Talk. Polished, composed, camera ready. "Mom, my Uber's 2 minutes out," he said, checking his phone. "I don't want to be late for this meeting." Cassie grinned. "Don't worry, you're going to kill it." Then she turned to me. "Lauren, tell him some of your teaching horror stories. Remind him what he's escaping." I stood slowly. "Actually, I'm heading there too." Ethan blinked. "What?" Cassie laughed, waving her hand. "She's kidding, Ethan. Lauren's still in the classroom trenches. Edunova is probably run by someone half our age with a VC tan." I pulled out my phone, swiped, opened the Edunova board portal, and turned the screen toward them. Lauren Kim, founder and CEO Ethan, stared at it, eyes narrowing. "You're Nova Carter?" I nodded. Cassie didn't speak. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. "You're joking," she said finally. "You've been running this all this time?" "I have." "But you're a teacher." I smiled. "That hasn't changed." Daniel entered from the kitchen, holding a cheese tray and catching the tail end of the exchange. He slowed as he saw the frozen expressions in the room. "I built Edunova after school hours," I said, still looking at Cassie. "While you were sharing Aspen brunches, I was coding in a studio where the radiator didn't work." I didn't know," she said quietly. "You didn't ask." Ethan took a step forward. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I wanted to build something before anyone tried to dismantle it with a dinner toast. I reached into my bag and pulled out Ethan's resume, the one he'd emailed weeks ago. I had printed it, annotated it, and today I'd brought it back. Across the top, "Rejected," in bold crimson letters. I handed it to him. He looked at the page as if seeing it for the first time. "We don't hire people who pitch buzzwords about equity while investing in crypto education apps," I said evenly. "We hire people who understand that equity starts with listening." He was quiet for a long moment. Daniel set the cheese board down without a word. Cassie shifted in her heels. "I didn't mean to." "You did," I said gently. "And that's fine. But today, I came as myself." Her eyes were damp but defiant. "You were always capable. I just didn't expect to have to take me seriously," I finished. She swallowed. Ethan stepped forward, his voice softer now. "Aunt Lauren, could I still learn? From you, I mean?" I looked at him. Not the resume, not the posture, but the boy who used to doodle rocket ships on his placemats. "If you're willing to unlearn first," I said, "then yes." Cassie didn't say another word. Her wineglass trembled slightly in her hand. I placed mine gently on the table beside the untouched cheese. Then I turned and walked toward the door. My shoes clicked softly against the marble. Not triumphant, just grounded. As I opened the door to leave, I glanced back one last time. Her house, usually so full of curated sound, music, laughter, performance, was silent. Her marble floor didn't echo as loudly as her silence. Cassie's Boy Mom account has been silent for 3 months. No brunch posts, no curated selfies, no captions about Ethan's next chapter. But today, in room 207 of Bronx Middle School, Ethan helped Luis with decimals and smiled like he meant it. It was mural day. The hallway buzzed with music leaking from a Bluetooth speaker wedged into a plastic cup for volume. The smell of acrylic paint clung to the air, mixing with cafeteria grease and the tang of hand sanitizer. Kids darted around with paint-splattered smocks, shouting over one another with the kind of joy that doesn't need permission. I stood near the door, arms crossed, watching Ethan really try, to keep a dozen middle schoolers engaged in a lesson about place values. It wasn't going well. Zion had 2 markers in his hands and was using them like drumsticks on a desk. Luis kept shouting, "Pizza," every time Ethan said, "percent." Jada sat back with her arms crossed, clearly waiting for him to say something that mattered. He looked at me, not panicked, but close. I didn't jump in. I just raised one eyebrow and tilted my chin. Let him figure it out. After a long pause, he pulled something out of his tote bag. A taco. Well, a laminated taco cutout from a class project someone else had abandoned. "If I have 3 tacos," he said, "and Zion eats 2, gone," Zion shouted, pretending to bite the air. "Right. Gone. So how many are left?" Luis grinned. 1. "And what fraction is that?" Jada rolled her eyes but muttered, 1/3. "Exactly." The energy in the room shifted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the kids leaned in. For the next 15 minutes, they talked tacos and math like they were inventing both from scratch. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time, Ethan's voice didn't sound like someone else's script. When the bell rang, the kids grabbed their backpacks and headed toward the mural wall. The final stage. Vines of color curled across the bricks, surrounding the big words they'd chosen together. "We are the future." Some kids painted their names in the corners. Others added stars, headphones, tacos. Ethan stayed behind. He didn't check his phone. He didn't pull out his laptop. He just started wiping dried paint off desks with a damp cloth he found by the sink. "You don't have to stay," I said, walking over. He shrugged. Didn't feel right to leave. I handed him another rag. For a while, we just cleaned in silence, the hum of music and laughter seeping in from the hallway. "You did okay today," I said. He looked down, cheeks pink. "I tanked the first 10 minutes. "Everyone tanks the first 10 minutes. He nodded. "Next time," I added. "Less jargon. More tacos." That got a smile. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a calendar alert. But it was a text from Cassie. "Can you help Ethan reset his portfolio? He's thinking differently now." I stared at the message for a long moment. Outside the classroom, the mural gleamed under fluorescent light. One of the kids had added a tiny drawing of a computer with a smiley face next to our logo. Another had written, "Miss Kim rules," in bubble letters no one had erased. I opened my camera and took a photo. Then I replied to Cassie, "Still just a teacher. Still changing lives." I didn't wait for her response. Later, as Ethan helped stack chairs, he asked, "Miss Kim, do you think I could ever get good at this?" "Depends. On what? If you keep listening?" He gave a short laugh, half relief, half respect. "I'll try." Students began to leave. One paused at the doorway. Jada's younger cousin, I think. Small voice, big eyes. "Miss Kim," he said, "if you ever open a school, can I go there?" I smiled. "We're already building it." He grinned and ran after his friends. Maybe that was the real startup all along. Not the app, not the press, not the pitch decks or partnerships, just the kids, the tacos, the fractions, the names on the wall, and the way a boy with too much confidence and not enough perspective learned to teach like he meant it. Just a CEO, sure, but always just a teacher. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one claps for. like a boy wiping paint from a desk, or a sister letting go of needing to be seen. I've learned that success doesn't always come with applause. It often comes quietly, through patience, dignity, and the choice to keep showing up. We don't always get the recognition we deserve, but we do get the impact we've earned. If this story reminded you of a quiet moment that shaped your life, I'd love to hear it. Sometimes, sharing a memory is the most powerful way to pass on what we've learned. Maybe the greatest things don't begin with applause, but with a quiet classroom, a hesitant question, or a boy learning how to truly listen. Not everyone needs a stage to become remarkable. A teacher can still change the world, with patience, with trust, and with a well-timed smile. If someone once believed in you before you believed in yourself, take a moment to remember them. And if this story made you pause, even for just a heartbeat, I'd love to know what part spoke to you. You don't need to write a lot. Just one line is enough to let me know we shared something real. This is Phoenix Revenge, where your quiet story finds its voice.